us to talk about it. So I requested Mr. Lamba to share his experiences with us. I also spoke to Mr. John Brackey and invited him over to talk about this sustainability in industrial gas business. We are fortunate that Mr. Lamba graciously accepted our invitation to be the guest of honor. Thank you, Mr. Lamba, and be the speaker of our special session, second time in a row. Before these fine gentlemen speak to you, I would like to share with you the reasons why we chose this theme. There are people who are intrigued about it. I personally feel that this theme has more relevance to Indian gas manufacturers and equipment manufacturers. Gas Standard Rules 2004 and SMP Rules 1981 in India are up for amendments, and most of the gas manufacturers and equipment manufacturers want the new rules to favor them. Indian industrial gas industry is going through an interesting phase, or we can say change. Views of Indian gas industry has got divided. SMEs who are having small air separation units of around 140 to 200 cubic meters per hour plants producing gaseous oxygen and nitrogen feel that they might have to close down their shops if less than 1,000-liter cryo tanks become more popular because they do not have the liquid to supply to their customers. Other set of manufacturers, they feel that if the new rules do not favor their line of businesses, then they stand to lose a lot of money as they have already invested in these tanks. By year end, new rules should be there, and let's see which way it goes. But one thing is definite, and that is everyone is fearing change, little realizing that change is inevitable in progressive society. Change is constant. Everything in this world changes except change. Humans have been resisting change for centuries. We have to change our mindset. Indian gas industry cannot ignore or cannot afford to ignore technology, and we need to harmonize our Indian standard with international ones. AIIGMA has a role to play in drafting of new rules, and yes, we will play well. We need to change the way we think, and that's what I call paradigm shift. It is said that people need hope for a better tomorrow, and I feel SME sector in India is going to be alive and kicking, but we will have to make hard choices, preparing ourselves for a new age. May God bless us all with safe and healthy stay in Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, for a very candid speech. May I now request our Honorable Chief Guest, His Excellency Dr. T.C.A. Raghavan, to please present his inaugural address. I'm sure it will be very inspirational and interesting to each one of us here. Thank you, sir.
Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm most grateful to Mr. Tikku for having given me this occasion to meet all of you. And I would like to welcome on the dais with me Mr. R.S. Sasdeva, Mr. Aditya Goyal, Mr. R. Kannan, Mr. Nitin Shah, Mr. Sanjeev Lamba, and Mr. Anish Patel. It's a personal privilege and distinction for me to be present in this gathering with my colleagues on the dais here today. I thought I would share with you the broad context of your meeting in Singapore this particular week. It is, of course, a very good week to meet in Singapore when North India is in the midst of a cold wave, as is most of Europe and most of northern China. But apart from being in the salubrious climes of the tropics or of Singapore in particular, this is, in my view, a useful juncture for Indian manufacturers or a part of Indian manufacturers to be having an annual convention in Singapore. Many of you would be aware that it was only a few weeks ago that we had, perhaps for the first time ever, an ASEAN commemorative summit in New Delhi. That summit heralded 20 years of a dialogue partnership between ASEAN and India. At the core of the summit this time was the decision to formalize a free trade agreement in investment and in services. What this agreement signifies is a step which we had taken with Singapore about 8 or 9 years ago, is now part of an India-ASEAN interface. With Singapore, of course, we had concluded our first ever free trade agreement in 2005, and it was called a Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement. We had gone on thereafter to conclude similar agreements with Malaysia, with Thailand, and now finally with the whole of ASEAN. This FTA with ASEAN in turn sets the platform for a larger trade agreement with India, ASEAN, and which would comprise Japan, South Korea, and China, and Australia also, and which is referred to as the Regional Economic Cooperation Program. In brief, what we are seeing is a larger integration of the entire regional economies of South, Southeast, and East Asia. And this obviously brings forward new opportunities, new challenges, and a new set of issues for Indian manufacturing as a whole, and for those parts of manufacturing which are critical to its success, for instance, gases. So I do think your meeting here today is most opportune. I was very happy to hear from Mr. Tikku's remarks that the AIIGMA is committed to work proactively to encourage its members to adopt world-class management practices, build and uphold highest quality standards, and become globally competitive. It is well known that technological change is the driving force behind industrial growth and development. Essentially, productivity growth through good management practices, training and retraining has been the focus of attention in most economies which have otherwise been feeling the effects of global economic slowdown. So I'm sure your deliberations over the next 2 or 3 days will focus on these issues and on the critical aspects of productivity in Indian manufacturing. I thought I would take this opportunity to highlight the interest which there is in the Indian manufacturing sector, both regionally and of course globally. Part of this interest has been catalyzed or sparked by the government of India's own emphasis on the new manufacturing policy and on setting up new industrial and manufacturing hubs. In Singapore, for instance, there is a great deal of interest on the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, as also the corridors coming up in South India. And there are 2 or 3 Singapore entities or conglomerates which are looking at very actively taking up one particular hub in the Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor and focusing all their investments in it and creating a platform which would thereby give opportunity for Japanese and Korean companies to take up industrial units in this particular hub. I think your presence here today in the context of the Comprehensive Cooperation Agreement with Singapore, with the recently concluded ASEAN FTA, is very, very opportune. And I'm sure there will be opportunities for you, both in terms of inward investment into India, as also in terms of your own external investments to explore very usefully. Thank you very much for inviting me again. I wish you all a happy and useful and productive stay in Singapore, and I'm sure your deliberations over the next 2 days would be very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for highlighting the benefits of the new free trade agreement. We do hope this integration benefits India. We shall endeavor to grow our technical excellence in this direction. I now call upon Mr. Anish Patel to present his vote of thanks.
His Excellency Dr. TCA Raghavan, Indian High Commissioner at Singapore, Mr. Sanjeev Lamba, Member of Executive Board Linde AG, guests on the dais, off the dais, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to propose a vote of thanks to conclude today's inaugural session in this beautiful city of Singapore. Singapore is often referred to as Asia's economic tigers, for it has weathered regional crisis, including 1990